Viewers like you make this program possible. Support your local PBS station.
The French Chef is made possible by a grant from Safeway stores.
What's cooking here under this gossamer veil? An artichoke. We're doing artichokes from top to bottom today on the French Chef. Welcome to the French Chef. I'm Julia Child. Here is a great big old bad artichoke, and some people are terribly afraid of it. They see it in the grocery store and they don't know how to cook it, or they're afraid to order it in the restaurant because they don't know how to eat it. But it's one of our handsomest and most delicious vegetables. It's in season from October to May, and it's really is a bud with a flower inside of it, and you eat it when it's still a bud, and then this inside part here turns out to be a flower if it gets very stale. There you are whole, and there you are the part. And I'm going to point the parts out to you so you'll know what it is. You have, of course, your leaves here, and the bottom part of the leaf is what you eat. And then as you get all through your various leaves, and they all come apart, you end up with a cone, which looks very much like this. You see, that's this inner cone of leaves here, and then the bottom part here, which is called the artichoke bottom, is the lovely edible part also. And this little tender cone of leaves on little tiny artichokes is also edible. And this part, when you buy frozen artichokes, they're called artichoke hearts, or you get canned ones, they're also called artichoke hearts, and that's the tender edible cone. And then if you have just the bottom, which is this part right down in here, that's just called the artichoke bottom, or in French, fond d'artichaut, which is a real delicacy to eat. And we're now going to do artichokes in the most usual way, which is whole boiled artichokes. And when you buy artichokes, you want to be sure that you get a good firm green one, and feel the leaves, and they should be nice and crisp. And if they're old and withered and browned and cracked, just don't buy the artichoke, because unless you live in the sort of artichoke center of the world in California, they're fairly expensive. And usually a great big one like this, which is 4.5 inches, will cost you maybe even 30 cents a piece. April is the month in which they're least expensive, and these small ones like this are the kind that the Italians and Europeans eat, and they can be even smaller than this. This is about 2.5 inches in diameter, and this, which is a very generous, luxurious one, is about 4.5 inches across. And to prepare it for cooking, you first want to wash it under running water, and you just put it under the sink like this and run cold running water into all the leaves, and you spread them apart gently. And then when you've washed it out, you want to break off the stem. And you want to break the stem off because there may, between the stem and the heart, be some fibers which would go up through the heart. So just put it on the surface and break it off. There aren't any fibers in this one because these are of a particularly nice quality. But if you get them a little late in the season, sometimes there are these fibers that come right up through there, and by breaking it off, you'd pull out the fibers which might have caught down in the, or might have grown into the bottom. And then you want to shave the artichoke off the bottom of the artichoke so it's going to sit nicely when you eat it, because or if you're going to have a whole boiled artichoke, you serve it just like that. And then you want to break off some of the bottom leaves, if you find that some of them are a little old or cracked, you want to break them off, or if they're small because they're not the lovely tender leaves. And then you want to even this off around here, so you take a little knife and even off the bottom. And then you'll notice the ends of these leaves here are rather pointed and a little bit prickly, and so it's a good idea to cut these off. You can, of course, boil the artichoke just as it is, but it's much better to cut off the ends of the leaves, and then nobody will prick their fingers on them. So you just take a big pair of shears and keep turning it around until you get up near the crown. And then you just cut the rest of that off with a big sharp knife. And if you're doing several artichokes together, because they discolor very quickly, you want to keep rubbing them with lemon. Just take a piece of cut lemon and rub all the cut portions like that, and that will keep it from turning dark and discoloring. And the other solution would be to put them in acidulated water until you're ready to cook them. And then when you've gotten all your artichokes ready, you get a big pot of boiling water, and you add one per each quart of water. You put in 1.5 tablespoons of salt. And then, when the water's at the boil, you put in your artichoke, and as you notice, they never sink all the way down. So you have to get the water to come up over the artichoke. You take a piece of cheesecloth, which you've washed well. As you notice, with cheesecloth, if you don't wash it, there's always sort of a medicinal taste in it. But it washes very quickly with just soap and water. And then be sure that your cheesecloth is damp, because it's going to act like a siphon. And you just drape it over your artichoke or chokes like that. And then the fibers of the cheesecloth just siphon the water up over the artichoke. And as it boils, the water keeps coming up over the top of the artichoke, so that the top remains the same color as the bottom. Now, one thing some people, just to keep an artichoke green, will put soda in the water, but you never want to do that, because that is bad for not only the vitamins, but it gives a sort of an off taste. And you always boil it in an uncovered pot. One general rule with fresh green vegetables, you never cover the pot. You always let them boil uncovered. And as soon as it's come up nicely to the boil that way, you let it boil rather slowly, but definitely boiling. And an artichoke this size, which is about 4.5 inches in diameter, will take about half an hour of boiling. And this little one here will probably take 20 to 25 minutes. But you can't tell, because it depends on how fresh they are. These large artichokes that I have are extremely fresh, and the ones that I had boiled in here were about 25 minutes and they were done. And you can tell how they're done by, when you've timed it to the minimum time you think is right, you take a sharp little knife and poke it into the bottom, and if it goes in very nicely and easily, then it's done. And you want to be careful not to overcook them, or they'll begin to lose their shape. And one of the very nice things about artichokes just as a plain vegetable, if you're having company, is that you can serve them either hot or cold or warm. It doesn't make any difference. And you have to boil them in one layer in the pot. And if, say, you were going to serve 6 of these great big artichokes, and you only had one pot this size, you could boil 3 of them, drain them, and then boil the 3 other in the same water and serve them warm. And now I'll show you how you serve a whole boiled artichoke. And there are some imported plates that are special artichoke plates that have a little center in the middle, and then they have little places where you put the leaves and another little place where you put the sauce. But unless you unless you had an awful lot of ate artichokes every day, I don't think you need one of those plates. Otherwise, you can just put it on any kind of a dinner plate. And then when you eat them, you see you take each leaf off, and then you just, this is the edible part, this lower part here, and you just put it right in your mouth and bite it off. And it's all that bottom part of the leaf that you've eaten, and it's just delicious. And then you just arrange your leaves like that on the plate as you've eaten them, and then finally you get down into the heartland, which we're going to see later. And now, if you don't, you can also, you serve an artichoke on a small plate and consider it as a separate vegetable course. It's a large, if you're serving a large size one like this, it's such an important and also fairly expensive vegetable that you always consider it as a separate course. It would either be your first course or you'd use it as a separate vegetable course. And say that you had your main course here, you might have had a lovely roast beef or some kind of a fancy veal dish, and then you would have your artichoke as a side dish, and then when you'd finished your main course, you would you could just eat your artichoke and put the leaves on your plate like that. And then I'm going to show you something else, which is, if you would like to be extremely nice to your guests, and that would be to remove the choke. As you remember, we have down, I guess I didn't even show you the choke. Here's your artichoke bottom here, and there's some very sort of fuzzy, hairy business right down there that covers this bottom. And we'll see it when we get to doing just the plain bottom. And this is, you can't eat, so this is always taken out. And if you'd like to, and if you have the time and really love your family and guests, you can take the choke out for them. So take your cooked artichoke and give it sort of a push like that. Then, I think I'd better put my glasses on so I can see this. And then very gently spread the leaves apart. And then when you get down in the center, you see there's this little tender cone of leaves. And all of that part is edible, so you put that to the side. And then as you see, when you're right down in there, we're getting just about to the choke. And this you would remove with a spoon. And if your artichoke is properly cooked, it's very easy to remove this with a spoon. And you have to do it rather delicately. Now look at that. You see that's just sort of a little hairy business, and it isn't, you can't eat it at all, so you always have to get rid of it. And that's the part that will eventually be the flower when the artichoke gets too old. What is it? Gets too old to dream or gets too old to eat? Now, you see, this really would be a labor of love to take this out for everybody, but it makes, if you're trying to be elegant, it's a rather nice thing to do. You have to get all of it out. This artichoke has been fairly well cooked, but I think we're going to be able to put the leaves back together so that it looks nice. Then you push your leaves back in, and then if you want, you can put your choke upside down like that. I mean, not the choke, that's your little heart. And then another thing you can do is to put some sauce in the inside where the heart is. If I'd had a little, I think I was a little rough with that. We'll just pretend that held together a little better. And then you can put your sauce in. Now, of course, you can eat artichokes either hot or cold. And if this is sort of warm, and this could be hollandaise sauce, but it's actually a homemade mayonnaise. So you just put the mayonnaise. I should have really been more careful with that, but I think you'll get the idea. You can put the mayonnaise right onto the bottom like that, and then close the artichoke up around it. And then you don't have to have any little sauce boat to serve with it. And you could even cover that up like that, and it makes a surprise. So that's a very nice thing to do with artichokes. And this would be, I think, probably if you were serving artichokes as a first course in a fairly fancy dinner, you could then do that. And now we are ready to do artichoke bottoms. And artichoke bottoms is the lazy man's way to eat artichokes, and it's also a fairly extravagant way to eat them. And the bottom is, well, again, we'll look at our artichoke. It's this whole area down here with the stem off and up to here. And here's one, if you've taken all the leaves off, and that's the way it looks, and you still have your choke in here. And then, after you've cooked it, you take the choke out, and you have this lovely little case which you can use if you're using a small artichoke. You can use the small bottoms and fill it with béarnaise sauce if you're going to have filet mignons. Or you can use it very nicely as a first course by filling it with creamed seafood. And this you can do either hot or cold with a French dressing, or else you can fill it with a hot sauce and brown it in the oven. Or you can also use the heart by cutting it up and warming it very gently in butter and salt and pepper and serve it along with a vegetable garnish. It's just delicious, but it is extravagant, and you don't make them out of cooked artichokes. You do it out of a raw artichoke if you want to do it in the professional manner, which we want to do. So again, you break your stem off. And I'm doing this twice so you'll remember about breaking it off, because if you've had an artichoke bottom that has sort of a fibrous quality to it and you've paid all that money, you're rather mad. And now you're going to break the leaves off to about half the way up. And when you break them, you bend them like that until they snap, and then pull them off. And see, by bending them that way, it's just like breaking off a piece of asparagus when you break it. When you bend it, it breaks where it's still tender. So just break and pull. See that? I'll do that again. Break and pull. So then you're leaving the edible part still on the heart. I remember when I first did these in France with a chef and some Americans. The Americans are just absolutely horrified that anybody should take off all the leaves of these artichokes. Of course, if you're horrified at this, there still would be maybe 1/8 of an inch that you could eat, so you can boil the leaves separately and then scrape it all off with a spoon, which would take rather a long time to do, and you'd probably collect about maybe a tablespoon of edible artichoke. But I think if you're going to do artichoke bottoms, you have to decide that, by heaven, you're going to be extravagant for once, because they are so good. And now, see, we've gotten the leaves off to about the halfway mark there, and you can feel with your thumb where the bottom ends. And so you want to take your knife and cut it off right there. You see, there's just the beginning of the choke there. And then, particularly with artichoke bottoms, you want to be very careful to keep rubbing it with a cut lemon. Because every place that you have cut, if you don't rub it with lemon, it will darken, and the lemon keeps it from being dark. And then you're going to start and take off. See, there's this green part here where the leaves still were, and this is tough, and you have to have every bit of this artichoke heart edible. So you turn it upside down and then just sort of turn it against a very sharp knife, and you shave off all those little bits of green. Because all the parts that show green are tough, and it just should end up being a very pale yellow or almost white. And then you keep rubbing it with lemon a little bit. And then after you've done all of your artichoke hearts, however many you're going to do, you drop them as they are done into acidulated water. And that means just water with lemon juice in it. And again, you have to even that off. And then just keep rubbing with lemon. And the acidulated water would be 1 quart of water and 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. And you can, for this kind of sort of acidulated water, you could perfectly well use that reconstituted lemon juice that comes in a bottle. I think it's very good. Some people sniff at it, but I think it tastes exactly like lemon juice, which it's supposed to do. And now, when you have that all done, you drop it into your acidulated water, and then you're ready to cook it. And as you notice, you leave the choke in. You don't take the choke out until after it's cooked. And then, and this is what you're aiming to do in cooking these, is to keep them as white as possible. You don't want them to darken. So you cook them in what the French call a blanc or a blanc, and that means a white, which means it's flour and water and lemon juice and salt. So I'm going to use about 2 cups of water, so I'll use about 1.5 tablespoons of flour. And then I'm going to add a little bit of water first to make a smooth paste. And then I've got some simmering water here, so I'll just put some simmering water in and then bring it rapidly up to the simmer. And I'm going to put in 1 tablespoon of lemon juice for my 2 cups of water. You don't want to have too much lemon juice in, because if you do, your artichoke hearts have sort of an acidulated taste. But you want to have just enough, and that's about right, I would say. That's 1 tablespoon to 2 cups of water. And then we'll have about 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. Get used to measuring your salt in your hand. It's so much easier. Because it's an awful nuisance to have to fish for your measuring spoons all the time. Now, when that comes up to the simmer, you put in your artichoke heart, and then you want to let that simmer very slowly for 20 to 30 minutes. And again, you can tell exactly when they're done by putting your knife into the bottom. I'm always saying heart instead of bottom. I don't know why. This is the bottom, and when you have the cone attached, it's the heart. So if I say heart, read bottom. And now let that cook very slowly. Uncover it again until it's done, and then when it is done, and you can tell by putting your knife in, if you don't want to use it right away, you can just leave it in its acidulated water. I have some here that I cooked last night, and they just stay in this blanc, or flour and lemon juice water, until I'm ready to use them. And then, when you're ready to use them, you take them out of the water, and you want to remove the choke. And you'd rinse them off, because there'd be a little sort of flour in them. And then you take a spoon again, or sometimes even a grapefruit knife, and you just take that choke out, just the way we did in the whole artichoke, in which we were being nice and taking the choke out for our guests. This one has been cooked rather firmly, so that the choke is a little bit hard to get out. But if you've cooked it a little bit firmly, you just keep on carefully. Now that's beginning to come. Once you begin to get that fuzzy choke out in a little piece, then the rest of it comes off fairly easily. And then when you've gotten all the choke out, you see, with this one, I didn't cut down very far, because this was such a tender one that the leaves were still tender up to here. But if you want, depending on the shape you want, you can just shave these leaves off, and you can use whatever tender edible parts you have. You can beat it into a hollandaise sauce or a mayonnaise, and so nothing is lost. And when you have your heart all done, would leave it always in acidulated water until you were ready to use it. And then to heat it again, say that you wanted to heat it for to fill with something like béarnaise sauce or something else, you would turn it upside down in a buttered baking dish and salt and pepper it, and then cover it with wax paper and put it in a 325 oven for 5 or 10 minutes till it was nicely heated through. And then when it's nicely heated through, you can use it forever, whatever you would like. We will say that this one is being heated through, and I'm going to use it for a little first course. And has had butter and salt and pepper on it, and I'll put a little more pepper on. And that's beautifully flavored and nice and hot. And I have here a little cream sauce with cheese in it, a sauce mornay. So I'll put a little bit of sauce in the bottom of it. And then we have a poached egg, and that's been heated in hot salted water, and then you drain it off on a towel, and you put your poached egg on top, and then you put a little more sauce on. This is a sort of like an eggs benedict, but in an artichoke bottom, and it's really much nicer. And then put on a little decoration, like a little bit of parsley. And that makes a lovely little first course or luncheon dish. So I'm going to bring it into the dining room, and it will be a first course. And I'm also going to show you how to eat an artichoke, because we want to go through every part of the artichoke. So you take your leaves off, and you have a little dish either of melted butter or a vinaigrette, and a vinaigrette is just an oil and vinegar dressing with herbs, and you dip your leaf in, and then you eat it, and after you've eaten the leaf, you put it down at the side of your plate, and you go on with all the rest of your leaves, dipping and eating them, and then finally you've eaten off all of the great big leaves, and you come to this heart, this cone shape. So you take your fork, and of course you have to eat all of this in your fingers. That's one of the funnest of it. And then you pull off the cone, and all this about halfway up the cone is edible. So you dip that whole thing into your sauce, and then you eat that, and then you come to a little tiny cone of leaves which are covering your heart, covering your choke. So you take those off. You can use fingers or knife and fork, and then you cut your heart in your bottom in half, and then you cut it in half again, and then you just take with your knife and fork, you cut the choke part off, and then that whole bottom part is edible, and it's just lovely. So we've now examined artichokes inside and out, and we've eaten them from top to bottom, and that's all there is to it. So that's all for today on The French Chef. This is Julia Child. Bon appétit.
Julia Child is co-author of the book Mastering the Art of French Cooking.